Well, thank you all for joining us for this wonderful presentation tonight, Dr. Scarpa, Dr. Sollitto, for coming out, the A Squad, these wonderful people of Grow, also staff members on campus and faculty. So it's amazing to see them in different lights during the day, earlier today, in a different capacity to here this afternoon. So whenever the floor is yours.
Well, thank you for having us. I'm Dr. Michael Sollitto. I'm the chair of the IRB.
He's also what? Associate Professor of Communications?
That's true. Yeah, I'm Associate Professor of Communication. Sometimes I forget that, but that is true.
That is true, right. You have two hats. I'm John Scarpa. I'm the IAC and IBC coordinator, animal care and biohazards. I'm former faculty here in life science. I've been doing the compliance work for the past 3 years now.
That's right. And so we're here because we are going to talk about research compliance, which deals with research ethics and treating human beings well in research studies and treating animals well and handling biohazards well, which Dr. Scarpa can talk to you more about that here in a little while.
I handle Dr. Sollitto with care.
That's right.
So let's see how well we can operate this. We'll go. So yes, the basic thing, what is the Office of Research Compliance? That's who you're going to contact besides individual peoples. And our office, right, the ORC, sometimes known as Research Integrity, and it may actually change names here soon, provide training and support for faculty, students, and staff, right, to promote ethical research practices. That's what it's all about. We serve to the research community by coordinating institution-wide research compliance policy and procedures to ensure that our university is compliant with federal, state, university, and local laws and regulations that govern the conduct of research. Part of that in there is university regulations. Some people go, it's not. The university has their own regulations that also are part of this. The big O. So there are 3 committees that we look at. First one is IACUP, the Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee. And it only deals with animals that are vertebrates, right? Ones with a backbone. So all those insects, nobody worries about. Jellyfish, nobody worries about. Yeah. However, believe it or not, right now there's regulation coming up, possibly for mollusca, the squids and octopus.
Oh.
And there's a group that's actually starting for insects. So I always tell the animal people, if you don't want those regulations, you got to go out there and remind them that there are people who really do want to see that. Yeah. Most researchers want good, healthy animals, otherwise your research not done. Yeah. Where do these regulations come from? There's the Animal Welfare Act that was promulgated by the United States Department of Agriculture. And then there is the National Institutes of Health, NIH, Office of Laboratory Animal Welfare, OLAP, with the Public Health Service Extension Act. There are 2 different groups, and animal people have to look at 2 different law regulations overall. How many people inspected? It can be crazy at times. It hasn't been brought together, but that's where it comes from. This is federal. Anybody want to guess why animal care and use came up? Why the feds got involved?
Yeah.
Well,
The lab rats?
no, it wasn't lab rats, believe it or not. It was that it sounds odd in this political environment, but dogs were being stolen and used for research. People's dogs.
Burn it all down.
Burn it all down, right? But it really was. And this goes back 60s and 70s. That's what it started. It started people going, pets were disappearing, and that's how the feds got involved. And that's why people turn around. It's like, hey, they found pets that were being used in research, and that's how this all started. Yeah. So the history is always right. How do regulations come about? You really do understand that for everything. I'm sure when you get to human stuff, you understand that. Biohazards, pretty interesting. Bio, right? So living thing, biohazardous agents. We're talking bacteria, viruses, human blood, and recombinant DNA. And that's what really pushed this one. The whole idea of gene editing. And you go like, well, it's not bio, but it obviously affects biology. And so that's where that started. And that is National Institute of Health, the Office of Science Policy. Oh, I need to look that up. I think they might have changed their name recently. I just realized. And biosafety and microbiological and biomedical laboratories. So originally it started with NIH and this whole idea of DNA, recombinant DNA. Most universities and many places have also adopted what's called the BMBL, that biosafety, microbiology, and biomedical laboratories. Also, So it encompasses all the bacteria and human work. So those are my two areas. And and of late, the other part is select agent regulations. And these select agents were things like Marburg virus and things that really can take out humans. And recently they've changed what's known as dual use of research concern. The idea if you can take a bacteria and turn it into a biological weapon. It used to be limited to seriously a handful, two handfuls, like, more or less of organisms. Now with the new DNA and genetic editing, they're saying, we really are looking at like every agent. So the researchers have to rethink and we have to relook at our regulations. I'm going to take, whoops. You're going to edit that one out. You want to take it from here?
Yeah. Well, so that brings us to the IRB, which is all about human subjects research. Everybody out there, raise your hand if you're excited to learn about the IRB.
Oh,
Make some noise for the IRB.
Make some noise, IRB.
And so as you see here on the slide, we're about protecting human beings in research. And typically what we're going to see when we see IRB protocols is something like a survey or something like an experiment. Every now and then we might see something regarding some sort of medical procedure. That's really unlikely at this institution, but the regulations that govern institutional review boards actually stemmed from concerns about biomedical research. So often when you read something in your textbook about the IRB or the history of human subjects research and the ethics concerning that, it stems to people's concerns about the ethical atrocities happening in biomedical research. Now, like I said, that's unlikely to occur here because mostly the human subjects research we examine and we review are things from education or from the social sciences, where mostly we're looking at reviewing projects involving interviews or surveys or focus groups, or examining some sort of human behavior in an observational fashion. So that kind of social science research. And then we are governed in a way by the Department of Health and Human Services, and specifically within that entity, the Office of Human Research Protections. So anytime we talk about the regulations, this is basically what we're talking about is OHRP. And they have some really helpful resources. If you ever are curious about what the definition of research is or what human subjects research is, OHRP has some really intriguing resources for you. And then also we deal with informed consent of subjects, which basically calls back to the Belmont report. Raise your hand if you're familiar with the Belmont report. Seen some head nods, seen some head shakes. So quick history lesson. The Belmont report is I guess you could call it a scientific report that came out of a government task force. And in that document, they produced 3 ethical principles that should govern human subjects research. 1, there is respect for persons. 2, there is beneficence. And then 3, there is justice. Now, the respect for persons deals with this informed consent, because researchers need to provide their subjects with enough information to make an informed decision about participating in a project. And then justice is about everybody having an equitable chance of receiving the benefits of a project. And then the beneficence is that the benefits should outweigh the harms. Okay. So you have the overview. But in terms of the IRB and where we come into play, it all begins with the definition of research. So something must meet the definition of research for us to come into play and actually need to review it. So if you'll push the button. This is our definition of research. I've placed it there on your keepsake for our evening. But so the definition of research is the systematic investigation including development, testing, and evaluation designed to develop or contribute to generalizable knowledge. So like I said, that's where it begins. And many of you are conducting projects that do count as research because you are testing a theory or you're developing a theory, but you're also desiring to contribute to your knowledge base, meaning you want the findings that you discover in your project to inform the body of research findings in your discipline. And that's something that we mean by generalizable knowledge, that you want it to contribute to the knowledge base.
And before we move on, one thing that's different between these committees is, and this is always interesting, right? This whole idea of research, biohazards, right? We're not worried about research. You're dealing with a biohazard. Animals don't have sentience, more or less. So we say anything you do with them, they can't make a decision. So it is. So we don't have the same question up front. Is it research? You're using an animal, you're under our regulations. You're using a biohazard, you're under our regulation. Where when you go to do this work, this is a question that comes up specifically under IRB.
Okay, so let's give you some details about what the IRB is. So the IRB is a committee. You see a definition up here, you see a definition there on your keepsake. But we are tasked with protecting the rights and welfare of human research participants. So we are a collection of people with diverse academic backgrounds, diverse experiences, and then we come together so that we can assess research projects and then vote on research projects. And that's why we exist, basically, if you continue here. There are certain review categories. One, there is what we call exempt. This is the most common type of research we tend to see on this campus. It's really low in risk. It's excluded from our federal regulations, meaning that the common rule is actually non-existent for these kinds of studies, meaning we don't follow the common rule unless we want to for these kinds of studies. But what that means in practice is if you are conducting a project with adults and that only includes a survey or maybe includes an interview, there's really minimal risk in there. It's likely to be exempt. Now, the next category is expedited. And expedited is about no more than minimal risk, but these kinds of studies still include the entire list of approval criteria for the IRB, but it gets its name because we can actually facilitate these reviews outside of a convened meeting. So we can actually facilitate these reviews kind of quicker. That's where that name comes from. It's kind of misleading, but expedited reviews are thought to allow the IRB to review something outside of a convened meeting. Now, expedited is still relatively uncommon here at this institution. As I said, exempt is the most likely kind of research we're going to see. I'd say maybe 1 out of every 10 submissions that we get is an expedited study. And there are 7 categories for exempt. So, I mean, for expedited. So if it fits into 1 or more of those categories, then it counts as expedited, but still relatively uncommon. And then the full committee review is probably what you think of whenever you submit something to the IRB. The full committee review means that you submit it, it's thought to be more than minimal risk, and then it goes to a meeting and people review it and they vote on it. However, I should say, full committee review is actually relatively rare on this campus because we rarely get the kinds of studies that come into our IRB that require the review of the full committee. And I know that's what people tend to think, that when they submit something, it might take a while to get reviewed because it's going to have to go to a meeting. it's actually unlikely to be the case. As I said, often the research around here is no more than minimal risk. It involves your typical social science research methods of interviews and surveys, focus groups, stuff like that. So rarely are we going to see full committee reviews. I'd love to see more. I'd love to see dozens more full board studies. So tell all your friends. So if you'll advance the slide for me.
Yeah, actually, I think yeah.
So what we do is, in the case that we have a full board study, we assign 2 reviewers to it. So those reviewers are tasked with looking at the study and making their recommendations. And then in the meeting itself, they provide an overview of the study. They provide recommendations on how we should vote. So we call a motion, or we call it to question, if you will, if you want to use Robert's Rules of Order terminology. And as IRB members, we can vote to approve it as submitted. We can request changes, which allow the researchers to make some modifications if the board members see that there's something that needs to be addressed. And then there is disapprove. Now that's also rare. What we do tend to see in our most recent full board studies is request changes, meaning that they come to the full board study in pretty good shape, but the members ask for a few different things to enhance the protection of human subjects. And then the researcher makes those changes, and we often have the chair review those modifications and then make that final determination. And I think at least one of you in this room has experienced that process. Raise your hand.
Yeah, it wasn't scary. It was good.
It was good.
Yeah.
It was a good meeting. And to that point, so when we do have full board studies, we invite the research team into the meeting, and the researchers are welcome to provide an overview, answer questions, and we try to make it as collegial and collaborative as we can, because the more information you can provide us and the better questions that we can ask you, the likelier it is that we can approve the project and protect human subjects in a much quicker way.
So what Dr. Sollitto has mentioned also about what happens at these meetings is similar to IRC and IBC. That is, a committee reviews whatever application comes in, and all the committees are doing the same thing, and that is they're protecting their subject, human, animal, biohazard, which also involves people, as well as the university. So we're that in between, and we're protecting you. Once that ruling is made, if the ruling was incorrect, it's not your fault. This is one thing we try to remind faculty members, like, don't try to think ahead and say, oh, this doesn't need review, and we'll come back to this. Send it in, we'll make that determination. And if we say it doesn't need review, fine. If later on it does, it's on us, it's not on you. So it's a typical middle manager. You're protecting who's above you as well as who's below you. And so looking at how we actually get these things done, right? Good old IRIS, Integrated Research Information Systems. I love these things that come up, right? Yeah. And then,
Love that UX design.
Yeah.
So it's compliance software. This is the one we're using now. And you have at least one good person on the IRB side to assist you with. Here's a research specialist, Michelle Eisenman. So if you have questions, hey, I'm stuck here or something, you can always go to her. Unfortunately, ICOOK and IBC has lost theirs, and they haven't replaced yet. So you get to deal with me, and I'm always going, I have no idea. I'm a compliance guy, so I'm learning the front end. But mainly when you say we talk about logging into Iris, it sets up an account. There are a few things that are fed in. And what we always try to remind people is that little part up there in the top left that says workspace, that it says something like that. Somebody like Dr. Sollitto and some other researchers who may be on a committee, they also have a committee part. And if you're in the wrong one, you're looking at the wrong thing. So some people members will go in, they're like, I don't see this. It's like, check up there that you're acting either as a faculty researcher or you're acting as a committee member. All of you should, if you're just researchers, it should be easy. And the other part is that right there at that top one on the left, top left, it sits there. It's just like start a protocol, right, or whatever, initiate your protocol. And then it rolls through. The rest of this stuff is all these wonderful metrics that confuses everybody, but it comes back. Main thing we always say is come back and see us. Login issues with Iris, we just had this today. This is one of the wonderful things. It occurs through single sign-on. It's not our office, okay? So if there really is a problem, it's an IT question most of the times. The other time is actually if you have, a lot of times we find that you need to clear your cache. People come up, it's like, this doesn't work. And if you clear your cache, go in and totally clear it. Sometimes that'll help, especially if you're working from home. You need your UIN. Sometimes to get in, all UINs, right? You can, if you don't know your UIN or your A number, you can find it on your My Island portal, right? Go in, just look for it, manage accounts, and you all that information's there. So that's how you can go back and find that. Oh, I'll say one more thing. The other part we find, usually with women, is a change of name, and that'll throw off your SSO. So if you came into the school under one name, somewhere you decided to change it, and I just had that today. They called. I can't get into I can't get into Iris. And first question always is, unfortunately, you know, you're one. Did you get married or change your name in any way? And it was yes when I came in. Initially I was this, and okay, it's an IT question now. How do you get that? With all of these committees, there's some type of required training. For animal care, there's a group called CITI, and don't ask me what CITI stands for anymore. We all know the CITI. It's animal care and use, and there's an occupational health enrollment protection here because they're working with animals. If they're allergic to something, dander, we're supposed to know. In IVC, there's CITI, the biosafety researcher and OSP, and then IRB. It's only CITI. There's no H. Haven't heard anything. That's human subject research. Now, if your project is supported by either National Institute of Health, National Science Foundation, or USDA, you'll need to complete the city appropriate section under responsible conduct of research. That's actually a federal area saying, look, if you're supported by us, we expect you as a student to understand that part of it. So there's one other part you have to do on city. When you go in, see the committee websites for those city and OHP links, with the city link specifically. Ready for this one? You want to take it from here? You want to take this one?
Yeah.
You can read it. You can read it as well as me.
Yeah, so we have these three committees and we do meet once a month. And as I said, at those meetings, whenever we have studies to review, we try to be as helpful as we possibly can so that if we do have requested edits or we have stipulations in our IRIS terms,
Right.
we're clear on how to make those changes so that you can easily make them and then resubmit. But also, it's also worth pointing out that we're really accessible. We can't answer questions for you. In fact, we want that. We want to be there to help you along the way to the extent that we possibly can. Like, we never want to be the kind of committee or office where we tell you to go do things and then we just run away and hide from you. So, but yes, we do meet once a month and we try to help you out as much as we can. And then, yes, so they get pre-reviewed. So at the IRB, I'm the one that is processing the submission and I will review it and I'll make sure that it is good to go for a full committee review if it needs to go full committee. And often what I'll do is review it at least once, maybe send you some stipulations, have you fix those stipulations. I'll get it back and then I'll send it out to the committee members so that they're seeing the most complete version. And again, it helps facilitate a timelier review process. And then John's doing that.
Why Dr. Sollitto is doing it for IRB is we don't have an IRB coordinator. Like I'm the IACUC IBC coordinator. We don't have an IRB coordinator, so he's having to do double duty. But the whole idea is that things come in, we look at it, and we try to make sure it's ready for the committee. Sometimes it's real minor stuff. You forgot to click a box, and it's easy enough to do. And as Dr. Sollitto was talking about, expedited protocols may be reviewed outside of convened meeting. Only IACUC IBC kind of, it's a real, they have very strict narrow window of why they can do that. Otherwise they'd have to do it at a convened meeting, but sometimes can. And primarily we all understand people want to get their research done as soon as possible. So I said, he's looking at it, everybody's looking at this as quick as possible. But
Yeah, and so I think we've really cut down on review times over the past 5, 6, 7 years. Like maybe some of you have heard horror stories from IRBs long ago where review times were just incredibly long. But I know that in the IRB, we're quick with our review times. And in fact, going up to this point too, so for those exempt studies that I mentioned to you, those get reviewed at what we call the staff level. As John mentioned, I'm the staff these days, so I'm reviewing exempt submissions. And I turn exempt submissions around in no more than a day these days because, like I said, they're pretty simple, pretty straightforward kinds of social science research studies. And also we have a lot of useful templates on our website. And I've also noticed there's a critical mass of research influencers on campus that have a pretty good way of working through Iris these days. And I think we're reaping the benefits of that. Unlike 4 or 5 years ago when Iris was new and everybody was getting accustomed to it. But so things are quicker than they used to be. Did you want to speak to this anymore?
yeah, there's nothing, it really comes down to different factors and what's going on. So we have some that are being held up now because you're waiting for permits from agencies. And actually, in reality, IACUC doesn't hold up for the permit, the project does, right? It's not really an IACUC thing. The animal work you want to do is fine. You don't have your permit. That's not us. But it sits there still sometimes, and people think that it's us, and we're like, it's not us. That's your Texas Parks and Wildlife or in this case, another one we have is it's collaboration between two institutions. The other institution is actually doing the review, and we're going to rely upon their review. They're taking their time, right? So there can be little things, and sometimes, unfortunately, a researcher forgets, and we try to remind. They have little reminders like you need to check it. We had one researcher; it was 6 months before they got back. So it does. It looks, and those are the ones you hear hard. It took this long. And this is where actually Iris has been fun because it logs where it is in the system. Like what it was unusual. So the last big thing here is we always say, always submit an Iris. You can talk to anybody, call the office, talk, but in your submission, submit. And there's one of the big things here, and that's called the determination. So you can actually go in and say, look, do I even need to do this? Here's the beginning of it. And either it'll come back saying we're not required. Great. You don't have to worry about this at all. Or actually I should put another one in there, required. And you do need to go on and give us a full application. And we're all working towards that goal of approval. As Dr. Sollitto said, I haven't seen a disapproval here. It's always, look, I need more detail. We need more clarification. We want to make sure it's being done right. Nobody wants to say your research can't be done because it's truly unethical or, it's not being done correctly. So that's where we come in on determination. So submit determination. And with that, we said, I get to do my shameless plug. Yes, I'm the chair for the Islander Cat Assistance Team.
Oh, okay.
No, the cats are not under animal care and use protocols because they are not research subjects. So thank you. And if you have any questions for us, this is really what it's about.
The cats.
What about the cats?
With you
Oh,
said
look at
this is
it. Cats.
really
It becomes a
about
cat's the first thing.
cats.
I'm sorry, what?
No, she has a real question.
Yeah.
Could you I'm gonna feel embarrassed for saying this, but could you show me how to submit an application? Like,
Cool.
I'm going to have to next week, but I'm not the PI on it, so I wasn't sure, do I have access to submit it without being a PI? Like if my PI says, go ahead and submit it for us, but I don't know.
Your PI would still need to sign off on
So
it.
you can
Okay.
do the whole application.
Like drafting it out.
You can do the
Okay.
whole thing, but ultimately the PI has to do the last review and say, okay, I approve and submit it. And that's where we
I
always,
don't know how to do that. Can you show me so I can show them how to do it?
Sure.
Where's that?
we can do our best we can.
We'd have to go through the entire Iris
Oh, no, don't worry
submission,
about
to do
it.
that, but
Okay,
I can tell you off the top of my head that
okay,
once you work through all of the boxes
Yeah.
and sections in Iris and click save and continue, and you come to a spot where you can no longer save and continue, it'll ask you if you want to sign off, and you can, which will then kick it to your PI.
Okay,
And the PI gets a notification, I think,
Yeah,
right?
they get an email, yeah, they get an email saying, you have something waiting in your,
your
you have
inbox.
something waiting in Iris.
could you clarify what the role study contact means?
It means you receive the correspondence.
No, yeah, study contact is someone that, any type of correspondence, so say, um. Say it's only you and your PI
Mhm.
on this, you would put yourself both as study contacts, meaning
Oh.
any type of any communication, both of you will get.
Okay,
Right, so we have a lot that have projects on my side, there may be a dozen people. Well, they don't want all the students seeing everything, but they want their right-hand person in the lab to see it, know that what's going on. And so when an approval letter or an amendment approval or something comes up, the PI and that study contact, and sometimes two study contacts, two people there are getting that communication. So they then go, okay, I know there's been an approval, there's been an amendment approval, there's been some type of change. So that's the study contact role.
so will they receive all kind of communication that's updated, or can I like filter what they can only see? Like,
Now, it's study
I
contact gets
promise you there's
all.
something
but
behind.
no,
So,
study
I know
contact
it sounds like
gets-
a weird question.
Study,
but there's-
study
okay.
contact gets everything.
Gotcha, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
And then, so similar to what John was saying, when we send out letters or we send out changes requested, then the people that are listed as study contact get all that correspondence.
Okay, okay.
So I have a question, like I've come here basically for my assignment. Like there is one assignment where we have to conduct this interview and all this observation. So for that, like I have been asked to undergo the training, IRB and city training.
Okay,
So like how much time does it take for me to get the approval for conducting interviews with the participants? After taking this training, I'm yet to take, so today is the first time like I'm getting to know more in detail about this.
Mhm. So once you submit it, how long will it take me to review it? Is that what?
So your city training, you want to get that done before you submit your project. When you submit your project, depending upon his review level, if it's going to be exempt, expedited, or full board, depending upon what the project is, will determine time. But almost all committees, since it's university, they really have done well with it. I don't think anybody goes over 30 days in essence, because you meet once a month. There's rarely anything really going for 30 days unless there's a major holdup.
Right, and so
So-
for your study, with it being an interview, if it meets the definition of research, then it's likely to be exempt. And especially if it's written well, you're looking at no more than a day or two for me to review that and send you some sort of correspondence.
But before you send that IRIS submission in, have your city training
Right.
completed. Because that's one of the first things we see is the city training completed.
Human
Perfect.
Studies Research.
Training, the deadline is next month, I think it's the 23rd, for submission of that particular assignment. So I'm basically concerned with the deadline also. So
Right.
initially I had no idea, I was just confused and then.
Yeah, so take your human subjects research city training. And then hopefully your faculty member, your professor can give you some guidance on how to submit, but then we're also here if you need us as well.
And unfortunately, that is him when he says where.
Right.
And because this is IRB. Every once in a while I can answer a question, but
Yeah.
usually it's like, Dr. Sollitto.
But John helps me out a lot too, because every now and then I have a question about something technological.
Yeah.
And he's useful, like,
Like VR?
well, with Iris or with the city training. In fact, I was gonna bring this up earlier, but if there's one thing that is the most common type of question these days about city training,
Yeah.
at least over the past 3 or 4 weeks, that seems to be the case. But I was also gonna bring up another case. Earlier I mentioned that it all begins with the definition of research. Well, every now and then people submit projects that fall outside of that definition of research, meaning they might be collecting some data but it's only to evaluate a program or it's to assess something. For example, in the spring semester, the College of Graduate Studies sent out to students a survey assessing the student satisfaction with College of Graduate Studies. They submitted that into IRIS, and I determined it to not be research. In fact, I call it non-human subjects research, and gave them a determination letter saying, fails to meet the definition of research, but you have my blessing, basically.
Yes, yeah. But what's interesting about that, and this is where you learn, it's not an IRB approved study, but it's been reviewed by an IRB to be not human subject research. There's this little, the language is always so important in these little things that come up. But this is why we always say, submit, talk to us, do it, as I said earlier, determination. It's easier to come in and ask the question and say, you don't need it, than a month later, after you started your research, saying, you can't be doing that and all that research is not even valid. You can't use it because you weren't approved yet. You can't backtrack an approval. It only goes forward. So people do research and then say, oh, well, you don't get the approval. It doesn't backtrack. We don't backdate checks.
And so that's why I said it begins with a definition. And often in the way that you describe something, I can help you along in helping you determine if it's actually research, which is why I made that qualifier to you, because you said you needed to conduct one interview,
Yeah, three people,
3 interviews.
three
Yeah.
to four.
3 to 4.
Yeah.
Requirement.
I'd have trouble calling that human subjects research because it seems like it's unlikely you're trying to contribute to generalizable knowledge.
But we don't make determinations outside the office. Until we see
Yeah.
the application.
So I have a question. So if like
We only get one.
I know I have so many questions.
Never.
As a teacher with my students, I used to get them post-it notes and I'd be like, I have only 3 questions for my ADD kids because they have just okay. There was some post-it. No, every question, I'd be like, you're 3 are done. So gosh, what am I talking about? Oh, qualitative research. So like 6 participants, is that considered?
Oh, this is an age-old question in the social sciences. So from a certain perspective, we have trouble calling qualitative research generalizable, right? It's all about
Yes.
localized understanding. However, qualitative researchers do believe that they're conducting research using that term research. So I take the perspective of they intend for it to be research. So we'll call it research, we'll review it as research.
Oh, so you do call it research, right? Wait, what?
Qualitative research.
Mhm.
Like if you're conducting a project involving qualitative methods
Mhm.
and you want it to be research,
Yes.
then we'll call it research
Okay.
and we'll review it as such.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, it gets into the philosophy underlying quantitative and qualitative research.
Yeah.
Because qualitative is about the localized understanding, unique meaning. Quantitative is about generalized meanings, relationships between variables, testing theory, generalizable knowledge.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It's one of my favorite discussions to have. I love the philosophy underlying theory.
Any other questions?
So the main point we really try to drive home is talk to your compliance officers. We're not bad people.
No.
We may have horns and fangs and other,
It's Halloween, 'tis the season.
That's our dress code year round. Now, but yeah, it is. And any university you're at, talk to them. They want to know ahead of time. We laugh because a couple of years ago we had a person come in. It's like, hi, I've done research here. Great to meet you all thing. And the person had a non-compliance thing like right off the bat. And it actually happened because of a student, they had done something wrong. And we were laughing because this person knew all about it and a student did something that was not where it should have been. So the PI didn't see it and we were like, oh, all these things, if you are not in compliance, is not usually a big deal. As long as you're not really trying to do something wrong. Many times it's, hey, I missed something. I did something wrong. In biohazard for us, a lot of times PIs will come in and they'll bring a bacterial strain with them because that's, hey, this is what I work with. But you can't have it on campus until it's registered. And so you're out of compliance. It's extra work for me. It's not for you, really. We have to sit there and just go, you did it wrong. We have to write up our really report and say, you won't do this again, get it registered. And so a lot of times it's those little regulations that trip people up, and it's not a big deal. When things happen, it's mainly that you document this happened and how do you not have it happen again, corrective action. And our auditors who come in and look at our material always like to see that we did our job, right? The PI did their job, they reported it or something like, and then they did something. We had an accident recently on campus in one of micro labs and they had a spill. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it has to be reported. And it's like, good, that's fine. How are we going to correct that next year, next time around? And the student was in a rush, did something that they shouldn't have done because they were in a rush.
Yeah.
And one of the things actually is the PI said, we're going to change the lab. We're giving too short a time to get things done. So they've seen it. And now that they've had an accident, they're like, yeah, we really need to correct it. It is. And now that we had this correct, we need to correct this. We need to change our lab. So it's not a bad thing. It's like when your child breaks something, tell me you broke it. So I can find where the glass is all over the place, right? Versus that you swept it underneath the rug, right? Yeah.
Anything else? Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Won't see me ever again. Everybody's
You never
you'll see,
know.
you'll see me. I know. You
Never
will.
know.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Well, that was fun. Thanks for reminding
Do
me.
you have a question?
Yeah.
After you